Hello, world, and hello, amazing Philippines. Good day. Today, we're going to discuss about our Module 4 of Assessment and Learning 1, and the title is Assessing Student Learning Outcomes. Okay, for our learning objectives, we have the following. The first is to explain the principles in assessing learning outcomes. The second is illustrate constructive alignment with a diagram. The third is determine whether an assessment task is aligned or not aligned to a given learning outcome. The fourth is make a complete outline of the different assessment tools and tasks. The fifth is construct a scoring rubric rather, either analytic or holistic. And the last is explain the implication of multiple intelligence to assessment. Let's start our lesson by having this definition of outcomes assessment. When we say outcomes assessment, it is the process of gathering information on whether the instruction, services, and activities that the program provide are producing the desired student learning outcomes. So if you are going to notice, there is now the gathering of information and of course having activities that the program provide to produce the desired student learning outcomes. And the other definition is that it seeks to determine the benefits or changes in the knowledge or skill level, even the behavior, the attitudes, no, or any change that may be seen as a benefit for the participants. Let's have this assessment cycle. If we're going to take a look with this, we need to start with, of course, either to ratify or revisit outcomes. No, we started with that. The second is, of course, we need to identify the evidence. So probably we can have the assignments from the courses that we have, or for example, an activity as it were. Then we need to collect data. After collecting the data, we need to analyze, interpret, okay, and the last probably is to draw conclusions and write our assessment report. If there is, of course, something wrong, we probably go back again to the ratification and revisitation of our outcomes. So because that is a cycle, so we can, of course, go back to what the process is having, of course, a problem or needs a remedy for that matter. We have, of course, the principles of good practice in assessing learning outcomes. The first is the assessment of learning or student learning starts with the institution's vision and core values. So there should be, of course, a clear statement on the kinds of learning that the institutions values most for its students. The second is assessment work best when the program has a clear statement of objectives aligned with institutional mission and core values. Each, of course, universities or colleges have their own, of course, mission and the core value. So such alignment ensures clear, shared, and implementable objectives for that matter. Another principle that we can have is outcome-based assessment focuses on the student activities that will still be relevant after formal schooling concludes. Okay, so the approach is, of course, to design assessment activities which are observable and less abstract. And as what, of course, this principle stating that it's not just probably no, can be applied on the four walls of the classroom, but of course, we go beyond. The fourth is assessment requires attention not only to the outcomes, but also and equally to the activities and the experiences that lead to the attainment of learning outcomes. So it's not just probably we assess, but we should provide, of course, no, activities and experiences, okay, that can make sure to attain, of course, our learning outcomes. We have, of course, this number five principle, which is assessment works best when it discontinuous, no, ongoing and not episodic. So as we all know that assessment should be, of course, cumulative by nature. Why? Because improvement is best achieved through, of course, a linked series of activities done over time in an instructional cycle. So we continuous. We do not just probably assess for today, okay, and probably no assessment at all in the remaining days, no, or the next time. We need to continuously, of course, assess. The six that we can have is begin assessment by specifying clearly and exactly what you want to assess. So make it sure, of course, that it's clear with our students what you wanted to assess at the end of the day or at the end of the lesson. So what you want to assess is are stated, of course, in your learning outcomes or lessons objectives. So it's very important, okay, that students are aware of what we wanted to have now at the end of the lesson. Okay, another probably principle that we can have is the intended learning or lesson objectives, not content, is the basis of assessment tasks. Take note. So you use, of course, content in the development of the assessment tool and task, but it is the attainment of your learning outcome, not content, that you want to assess. It's not the content, but it's, of course, your um, lesson objectives for that matter. This is, of course, an outcome-based teaching and learning for that. Number 8 is that it set your criterion of success or acceptable standard for of success. So it is against this established standard that you will, of course, interpret your assessment result. For example, here, now is a score of 7 out of 10. The highest possible score is 10, acceptable or considered success. Okay, so that's probably, of course, the standard that you have. So supposing if you will raise that to 8, okay, a score of 8 out of 10, okay, is acceptable or considered success. So that's probably, it depends, of course, the criterion of our standard, okay, of the success that we have. Ninth is that make use of varied tools for assessment, data gathering, and multiple sources of assessment data. I'm as a probably teacher, as your teacher, no? As sir a is using, of course, different gathering tools, no? Data gathering tools, what I mean. Okay, and of course, there are a lot of sources for that data. It is not, of course, pedagogically sound to rely on just one source of data gathered by only one assessment tool. So what I mentioned, the more varied, the better. Considered, of course, we need to consider multiple intelligence and learning styles also. Okay, take note the depth and order number 73 series of 2012 cites that the multiple measures as one assessment guidelines. Now, and number 10 is learners must be given feedback about their performance. And the feedback must be specific. Take a look with an example here. No? You observe rules on subject verb agreement and variety of sentences. Take note, it's very specific. Or the second example here is three of your commas were misplaced. So, okay, instead of having probably saying you have that wrong sentence, okay, it's better to have, of course, these three of your commas were misplaced. So feedback is clear and it's specific by nature. Another is assessment should be on a real world application and not on out of context drills. So the better, of course, they can apply that to the real life situation much better. Okay, then number 12 is emphasize rather on the assessment of higher order thinking. So we have, of course, the HATs compared to the LUTs. Okay, third is provide opportunities for self-assessment. That's for probably for students that they can assess, no, their own selves. Okay, let's have some of supporting students' activities, no? Okay, having an example of student learning outcomes, what supporting activities you can have. So for example here, a student learning outcome is students can organize information from secondary sources as basis of a research topic. So what activities can probably support this one? Okay, number one is practice differentiation, source materials, and one's opinion. Another probably activity that we can have is reading articles and formulating an original paragraph from quotes, no, paraphrases and summaries. Then we have, of course, writing of essays to develop the topic, and of course, integrating bibliographic entries in appropriate format. Another student learning outcome that we can have is student apply principles of logical thinking and persuasive argument in writing. So here, of course, we have some activities that will support. The first is, of course, forming opinion about, of course, the topic. And we have, of course, researching and writing about a variety of perspectives. Now, another probably activity that we can have is adapting style to the identified audience, and another is employing clear, of course, argument in writing. So these are, of course, the activities, the sample activities that you can have for different, of course, student learning outcomes. I have here phases of outcome assessment in the instructional cycle. So if you're going to have, it started with, of course, the institutional, okay, vision and mission. Then you have, of course, the program goals. Then you can have, of course, the subject objectives, no? It is followed by, of course, the desired student learning outcomes. Then we are doing, of course, diagnostic assessment, no? And we are deciding on lesson focus. Okay, and it goes to, of course, supporting student activities. And we do, of course, the formative assessment outcomes, no? With that, of course, we supposing the result is not good, we need to review and, of course, reteach, no? Okay, but supposing there is a good result with this, there is, of course, the mastery learning. And with that, we can see to it that we have, of course, good summative assessment of the outcomes. So because this is a cycle, no, a phases of outcome assessment, okay, in the instructional cycle, any probably now step here, okay, that you think that there is something is wrong, you can just go back. Now, supposing there's something wrong with the diagnostic assessment, so you just go there and probably repeat the process and so on. We have, of course, constructive alignment, no, with our learning objectives, the learning activities, and assessment. So we, of course, have this triangulation. When I say, of course, the learning objectives, these are what should a student know or be able to do, no, at the end of the lesson. And when we say learning activities, okay, it answers the questions: how does the students reach the final level? And lastly, of course, the assessment, which talks about how are knowledge and abilities measured. Okay, so this is the same actually with having, in having this kind of diagram. So you have, of course, the learning outcomes. Then from the learning outcomes, we are going to design our teaching and learning activities, and the same with, of course, assessment tasks. So that's it. Okay. Let's have an activity now for you to answer. So here, the instruction is determine whether or not the assessment task is aligned to the learning outcomes. Like, for example, okay, yeah, you get a piece of paper and probably write your answer. Yeah, for example, learning outcome is dance tango. So is this assessment task um, aligned or not aligned? So here in your assessment task, trace the history of tango. And the second learning outcome is interpret a given poem. Okay, your assessment task is what is your favorite line in the poem? And why is it your favorite line? Okay. What about number three? Present a report with PowerPoint. Okay, your assessment task is demonstrate how to do a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Number four is derive the meaning of at least 5 words by means of context clues. No. Okay, so your assessment is match the meaning of the words in column one with those in column two. And the next learning outcome is solve a given problem. And your assessment task is determine what are given and what is asked. Another learning outcome is that pronounce word, short rather a sound correctly. Okay, while your assessment task is determine, no, encircle the words that with short a sound. And lastly, trace the historical development of the Philippine basic education curriculum, having assessment tasks, okay, such as Trace the historical development of the Philippines basic education curriculum with the use of an appropriate graphic organizer. So you are using, of course, the graphic organizer to have this one. So that's the assessment task, okay? What's the answer for dance tango? Yeah, is it aligned or not? Okay, trace the history of tango. It's not. No, it's not aligned. Okay, and the second one, interpret a given poem. Yeah, what is your favorite line in the poem? What is okay, so that's it. What is your uh favorite line? So is it a line or not? Okay, not, no? Okay, then present or report with PowerPoint, wherein you demonstrate how to do a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, is it a line or not? Okay, not a line. Of course, derive the meaning of at least 5 words by means of context clues. Okay, what's the match the meaning of the words in column one with column two? Okay, so you derive, of course, you have, okay, a line. Then we have solve a given problem. So you need to determine, of course, the given and what is asked. Okay, correct, no? A line. Pronounce short A sound correctly. Okay, encircle the words with short A sound. Okay, aligned. Okay, what about trace historical development? Okay, that's aligned also. Okay, who got the perfect score? Okay, with this activity. Let's continue. Okay, we have, of course, variety of assessment methods, tools, and of course, tasks. So assessment methods can be divided into two, the traditional and authentic or alternative assessment. So when I say, of course, traditional, it assesses learning in a cognitive domain. Okay, can you still recall, of course, Bloom and, of course, the declarative knowledge by Kendall and Marzano? Okay, and with traditional, inadequate, of course, to measure all forms of learning. Okay, when I say, of course, authentic or alternative assessment, okay, we focus more on the psychomotor learning. So it's more on, of course, skills, no manipulation or manipulative by nature. So Kendall and Marzano, of course, the 2012 talks about procedural knowledge and it's about learning proven by product and by performance. So there is, of course, the output, no, or the product and the performance at the end when you have, of course, authentic or alternative assessment. Okay. In this next slide, actually, you can have assessment tools for cognitive, of course, domain, which is the declarative knowledge. Take note of this, no? Okay. Assessment can be, of course, selected response, wherein you can have, of course, the alternative response, the matching type, for example, and the multiple choice. In the constructed response, when we say constructed, you construct, no, you are doing it, okay, or you're praising, for example. So you have, of course, completion. So when you are going to complete, yeah, you are going to write the answer. And you have, of course, the short answer, the essay restricted or non-restricted, and of course, the alternative response. Okay. We have also the authentic assessment. So if you're going to notice now, what's authentic assessment? So when we say authentic assessment, it's an evaluation methods now that reflect real world tasks and challenges. And then, of course, it talks about assessing students' abilities in practical or meaningful ways. And it includes, of course, activities such as projects, no, presentations, portfolios, or performances that require our critical thinking, okay, problem solving, and the application of the knowledge that we have. So that's authentic. This authentic assessment can be divided into two: the product, no, and when I say, of course, product, it talks about, of course, the output. So example here is the reports, papers, research projects, and of course, even review. Okay, that's an example. Another is, of course, it is visual, no? So you can form or create graph, collage, reflective journal for that matter. Another category of authentic is the performance, wherein there is performance task. Another is you can have experiments, no, oral presentation and dramatization, and you have executing steps like, for example, tango, or delivering a keynote speech, no, opening a computer and teaching demo. So that's it. That's of course about authentic assessment. And of course, when we have this authentic assessment, we have these five probably things, okay, that is making sure, no, that we really practice authentic assessment. Okay, so probably the question is that why use authentic assessment? That's number one. No? Okay, here are, of course, the answers. Authentic assessments are, of course, the best way to determine life achievement. And essays, for example, and class tests do not relate to the real world. Okay, that's for example. So that's probably one of the answers that we can have. The second is how to incorporate authentic assessments. So, for example, no art students should be assessed by their artistic talents. So they're going to draw, or they can have the painting, no? Okay, another is try your best to relate authentic assessments to real world problems. So that's with how to incorporate authentic assessments. The third is how higher order thinking skills. Now it elicits the higher order thinking skills. Okay, so these assessment must challenge your students to create and solve problems. Also, let your students' imagination create these assessments. Okay, and number four is that it apply learn knowledge. So all students must one day apply what they learn in school to work setting. So there's application now of what you have learned now in the field. And real life does not occur with multiple choice questions and essays. So that's it. Okay, and this authentic assessment, of course, uses rubrics or use rubric. Okay, rubrics. No? So authentic assessments are mostly subjective by nature, and rubrics are needed to set criterion and goals for your students. Okay, let's have the key characteristics of authentic assessment in, okay, include the following, of course. The first is, of course, real world relevance. No? So TASTA, mirror life real life scenarios rather students might face outside of the classroom. So real world. The second is, of course, it elicits higher order thinking, as what I mentioned. Now, it places the emphasis on analysis, the synthesis, and evaluation rather than, of course, memorizing or the simple recall of facts. Okay, the third is performance based. No, so as the learners, of course, demonstrate their knowledge and skills, there is actual performance rather than, of course, the test like multiple choice questions. Okay, then you have collaboration. Many authentic assessments encourages teamwork and collaboration, reflecting how work often occurs in professional settings. And lastly, reflection. Students often engage in self-assessment and reflection on their learning processes. Let's have this portfolio. What when we say portfolio, what does this mean, or what do you mean by this? No, so portfolio is a purposeful, rather, collection of student work or documented performance that tells the story of student achievement or growth. Okay, so we have, of course, it is classified into three, the working for portfolio. Now, so when we say working portfolio, it is a project, okay, in the works containing work in progress as well as, of course, finished sample of products, of works, care products. Then we have, of course, the assessment or evaluation portfolio. As the name, of course, suggests, no? The main function is to document what the students have has learned, okay, based on the standards and competencies expected of students of each grade level. And the third classification of portfolio is the display, showcase, or best works portfolio. So it displays, of course, it's display it display, the students' best work, and the students exhibit their best work and interpret its meaning. Okay. So here are, of course, the information about scoring rubrics. Okay, the first is a rubric is a coherent set of criteria for students' work that includes description of levels of performance quality on the criteria. And the main purpose of rubrics is to assess performance made evident in process and product. And lastly, it can serve as a scoring guide that seeks to evaluate a student's performance in many different tasks based on a full range of criteria than a single numerical score. So that's it. Now, in reality, it's really hard to score rubrics. Okay. You need to, of course, ample time, no, in scoring, particularly if we're going to talk about the analytic rubric. So here is the part, or here are the parts of a rubric. So you can see there, task description, no? It's the explanation of what students are expected to do or for the assignment. So you can see there, yeah, task description. And another is, of course, the scoring and scale, no? So that these are, of course, the different levels of skill development and associated points. Like, for example, you can see beginning 1 point, developing 2 points, proficient 3 points, exemplary 4 points. Then we have, of course, the descriptors, not descriptors. When we say, of course, descriptors, it's the description of what work at each level of development looks like rather. And the fourth part is evidence. No, these can be called as the criteria or components, and this is the categories or parts of the assignment you will of course evaluate. Again, the parts of rubrics are the task description, the scoring scale, the descriptors, and of course criteria components for that matter. Here is an example of holistic rubric. Yeah, you can see, of course, only the rating scale with the 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, and you have description there. Like, for example, for 5, the artwork shows outstanding craftsmanship with the clear attention to control, adaptation, and understanding of the media, or the medium rather, and it reflects a wide range of a value scale. Okay, and another is the student put forth extraordinary effort not to complete the project as well as possible, use the class time extremely well. So that's it. You can, of course, score as 5. Okay, supposing it's not like that, you can, of course, have the 4, the 3, no, and 2 as rating scale. So this actually rubric or holistic rubric is for individual art, no, output. Here is another example now of a rubric, and this is called analytic. So you can see there, of course, an infographic, okay, activity, and you can have here the category, which consists of 3 categories or dimensions. You have the content, the graphics and values, and references. But you can see the scale or the levels or points. So you have 15, okay, 10, 5, 0. And at the end of that, you're going to tally the points. Like, for example, in the content, how many, no? What's the course the score, or what's the scale or levels or points? So, for example, if you rated 10, okay, for graphics and visual, you rated 5. And of course, for references, you rated 15. So you have, of course, a total of 30. So that's it. And you need to interpret, of course, the result. Okay, here is the other explanation of the types of rubrics that we have. So we have analytic. The other one is, of course, holistic. No, okay. When we say analytic, its criterion or dimension trait is evaluated separately, in different. Okay, and good for formative assessment. It is also adaptable to summative assessment. That's analytic. Okay, when we say, of course, holistic. Okay, all criteria or dimension or trait is evaluated simultaneously, and scoring is faster. It is, of course, good for summative assessment. Like, for example, if you will have, of course, 40 students in a class and you have 3 classes, so it's better, of course, to check rather the output, okay, for holistic rubric. Okay, we have, of course, the assessment methods and multiple intelligences. So we're reminded, of course, to focus with the MI by Gardner. Okay, so what's about the MI? Now you can see a chart here, and we have the following, of course, intelligences that we need to cater, okay, as teachers when creating, of course, assessment. So let's have the musical or rhythmic intelligence. So this is creating and feeling a rhythm, no? To express, of course, our mood, okay, detecting and analyzing musical themes. Okay, we have also intrapersonal. So if we're going to have that, of course, it's within the self. Okay, it's more understanding your own interior thoughts and feelings in a very clear way. And we also have, of course, the interpersonal intelligence. So it's between people, and they are understanding the feelings, the needs, and of course, purpose of others. Of course, some of our students are naturalists, no, in nature, and thus it calls for naturalist intelligence. So here, of course, there is understanding of the nature, seeing patterns in the way nature works, and even classifying things. So that's, of course, naturalist intelligence. Going to the next is, of course, bodily or kinesthetic intelligence. Here, okay, there is the feeling and expressing things, no, through physical or physically, and it calls for doing hands-on work. The next is, of course, the visual or spatial intelligence. So there is, of course, creating and interpreting visual images, no? Thinking in three dimensions. And the next is, of course, logical or mathematical intelligence from the word, of course, math and logic. So there is, of course, reasoning, no? Or logical thinking and handling, of course, mathematical problems. The last that we can have in the AMI is verbal or linguistic intelligence. So this is actually using language to present one ideas, to express one feelings or your feelings, or to persuade other others. So regardless of which, of course, subject you teach, the arts, the sciences, the history, or math, you should present learning materials in multiple ways. So you have, of course, to create multiple learning materials, no? To cater, of course, the needs of our students. And take note, addressing the multiple intelligences can help, of course, instructors pluralize their instruction and methods of assessment and enrich, of course, student learning. In other words, of course, if we cater with this MI, okay, of our students, we are making, of course, our assessment better. Okay. And we have, of course, the assessment of learning outcomes for, of course, the K to 12 program. So the first is teachers should, of course, employ assessment methods that are consistent with the standards. Now, our basis is the standards that we have. Teachers must employ both formative and summative assessment, both individually and collaboratively. Okay, take note, we are called, no, to employ formative and summative assessment. Okay, that's for all, not just for somebody else. Okay, and grades are, of course, a function of written work, performance tasks, and quarterly tests. Again, grades are a function of written work, performance tasks, and a quarterly test. Now, the attendance is not, of course, included in that. Okay, then the cognitive process dimensions given by Krathworth. Okay, and understand, no, from remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and of course, creating, no, governs formulation of the assessment task. Okay, I hope you learned something from today. Okay, and here are, of course, our references for you. Okay, to learn more things related to our, of course, lesson. Okay, this is again, of course, Sir A. Yeah, saying God bless, and I hope that you learn for today's lecture video. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye bye.